Hey sis, what if the reason your boundaries are not working out isn't because you're too strong, but because you're using boundaries as protection instead of connection? And what if the real issue isn't men crossing your boundaries? It's you not enforcing them because you're afraid of losing the relationship or just that man. This this episode is about relational boundaries, feminine boundaries, and internal boundaries. Three categories high achieving Black women were never taught, and the ones that directly shape who you choose and what you tolerate. Thank you for coming back. I'm Marshaun Olaniyan. If you're hearing me for the very first time, I'm a shift relationship strategist, and I specifically help Black professional women to really understand what their blind spots are. So when they're in the relationship, they don't have to feel like they have to give up control, but they can showcase their softer side so they can connect deeply with the man that they want. This is Love Restored, and you are listening to and are watching KCCR Brownstone Cityscapes Radio. For this next 30 minutes, go ahead and get your pencil, your pen, your smartphone, take some notes, and as I always say, apply what resonates with you and literally throw the rest in the trash. If none of this resonates with you, then totally understood. But if it does, take what you will so you can watch your life, your relationships, as well as the way that you see and love on yourself different. I say relationships because a lot of times people think that when they're watching me that I'm only talking about your romantic relationship. That's the furthest thing from the truth, because a lot of what I talk about are what we can apply in different areas of our life. A lot of times what I also mention friendships. I mention familial relationships as well, because how we show up and do one thing in one area is oftentimes how we're showing up and doing the same thing in a different area as well. So with that being said, let's jump into today's topic, which is all about, it's all about boundaries that build connection. How to protect your heart without hardening it. What are boundaries? So let's talk about what boundaries really are and why most Black women were never taught them. Since boundaries aren't rules for others, they're agreements with yourself. There's a distinction between protection-based boundaries versus connection-based boundaries. Protection-based boundaries are the external boundaries we establish to communicate our needs and expectations to others. A connection boundary is the limit you set on how much emotional access someone gets from you. Many Black women only learn boundaries through survival, not through emotional safety. Never learning feminine boundaries makes you feel like you always have to do too much for others, try to fix everything yourself, and overlook those infamous warning signs. There are 4 boundary blind spots that professional Black women carry. The first blind spot is confusing independence with boundaries. Saying things like, I don't need anyone. This can masquerade as a healthy boundary, but is emotional self-protection. Blind spot number 2 is believing that boundaries will push people away. They won't. They will have people to respect you more. Relational conditioning, being the responsible one, being the emotional anchor, being the strong one. Blind spot number 3, over functioning so you don't have to set boundaries. Research actually shows that chronic over functioners fear disappointing others more than they fear burnout. Blind spot number 4, using your masculine firmness instead of your feminine clarity. Boundaries delivered with tension trigger defensiveness in your partners. Boundaries delivered with embodied softness create alignment. That's so very important here. It really is, because this is going to help you to understand why you struggle to enforce boundaries in your romantic relationships. A lot of high achieving Black women develop performance-based worth, making saying no feel dangerous. Masculine survival mode creates hyper responsibility, making you feel guilty for prioritizing yourself. And then we have the attachment patterns, where a lot of times avoidant, leaning women enforce too many boundaries, and anxious, leaning women enforce none. Then there's the nervous system overload that I talked about. But UC Berkeley found that hyper-independent adults have reduced emotional receptivity, making boundaries feel like abandonment. Then there's the fear of receiving that makes it easier to give than to ask. I wanted to slow down and stop here just for a moment and to mention my quiz, because my quiz it's called What's Blocking You from Being Soft in Love. A lot of times we don't understand or are even unaware of our areas of weakness. We are unaware of our area of our blind spots. This quiz helps you to become more self-aware of who you are and how you're showing up. So you're able to break those patterns that are distracting you, that are keeping you on the cycle of attracting the same type of guy over and over again. Helps you become more aware of what you need to do in order to break said patterns. Not only do you receive your results, you also receive a 3-page action plan so you can start putting these things into play, so you can start shifting and changing the way that you are showing up, because it really is up to you to become the best version of yourself. Because when you start to become and level up, the person that you attract is already leveled up or becomes to level up as well, because of what you have done. The internal work that a lot of us have yet to do, which is why we keep going down these same roads over and over again. This is the beginning of starting the quiz, so you can get a better understanding of where you are at in your love life, or lack thereof, why your relationships don't get to the next level, because you have yet to slow down and understand where you are at. If any of that has resonated with you, then the quiz link is in the pinned comments, is in the description box, and is also in the show notes, depending on which platform you are watching this from. Now, let's jump back into it, because there are 3 types of boundaries that every woman needs. 3 types. The first one is the emotional boundaries. What emotional labor you will and won't do, what tone, communication style, and treatments you accept from your partner. There's also the physical and time boundaries as well. How quickly you attach, how much access you give of yourself, and what pace matches your nervous system. I talked about the attachment styles, the avoidant one kept coming up for the most part in the last episode, but I also talked about how your nervous system can come into play, especially when it's over functioning. If you have yet to check out the previous episode where I talked about, what did I talk about? Hell. I'm pretty sure I talked about boundaries. Then go ahead and talk about, check that episode out. I can't speak today. Speaking of boundaries, in this one, there is the internal boundaries, which is the most important, which is like your self-regulation in the moment, your ability to witness your reactions without acting on them. Internal boundaries are the foundation. External boundaries fail without your internal boundaries. right? So we really have to figure out what's actually happening there. I remember when I was working with the client and she was dealing with the internal versus the external boundaries. And I also work with a lot of clients, and she was part of this, where they can set the boundary, but it's the enforcing of the boundary where the problems come into play. A lot of that is because you have a mismatch. You know that you need to set boundaries, but because your fear of possibly losing him, losing the relationship, having to start all over, you've been in this relationship for so long, you don't want to go back to the drawing board, all of these negative stories that are in your head that's playing over and over again, you fail to act on the boundary. Now, realizing that when you're not acting on the boundary that you have set, your respect level in his eyes depreciates. It keeps going down until there is no respect there. Have you ever seen people in relationships, specifically women, heterosexual relationships, where the man in this case starts to treat the woman like SHIT? And you're like, why is she staying with this dude? Some of the reason, not all, some of the reason could be because of this part where she said what her boundary is, said what her boundary was, depending on the time frame, and did nothing when the boundary was crossed. There were no consequences. And so only thing he had to hear was this. I want you to do that. I keep saying I want, right? And he know after a couple of days, y'all gonna be good again. Which in fact, you're not good. But let's get past that, right? He knows that he only gonna have to hear it for a couple of days, and then you are gonna come back around into your senses, and he will continue to be and do who he is, how he has been showing up. A lot of that has to do with the things that you can control. What you can control here is the enforcement of the boundary. Boundaries show that you know who you are, you know what you want, you know what you're bringing to the table, and you're not willing to allow anybody to treat you any different than what you know that you deserve. Boundaries are a way of letting people know what they can and cannot do with you, to you, for you, the way that they can and cannot treat you. So when we fail to act on said boundaries being crossed, that's not a him problem. That now is a you problem. It's not a him problem. It's a you problem. So if you cannot get into the point of actually enforcing the boundary that you set, you are already doing yourself and the relationship as a whole a disservice. The relationship as a whole is never going to get better. It's never going to reach the climax, if you will, if you don't have balls. Yes, imaginary. If you don't have the balls enough to actually speak up and ask for and enforce the thing that you know is supposed to happen in your relationship. That's why I'm enforcing your relationship, because what you deem to that is supposed to happen in your relationship, I might not feel the same way. So this is all about your relationship, the treatment that you are accepting or not, the time spent together, the emotional labor, how much you're taking on, right? The physical time limits that you want to spend with this person or not. I remember one of my girlfriends years ago, she was dating this guy. He was really good about this, although she just shouldn't have been with him. But for the sake of this story and boundary setting, I remember he told her he had every weekend off, but he told her he was only going to spend one day with her, not two. Now, that might have been extreme, whatever. He could have said, half a day, or every Sunday I do ABC, whatever. But he was just like, no, I'm giving you one day. Like, that's it. The other day is for me to do what I wanted to do. It was a bit rigid, but that was for me. Me and my thinking, that was rigid. She went along with it, and they end up not working out for other reasons, because once that boundary was set, she kept falling in line with all of the boundaries. And I'm not saying that she shouldn't. I'm just saying that a lot of them seem kind of like, for me, the friend, but also the coach at the time. I was like side-eyed and turning my head like, girl, bye. But at the same time, me, Coach Marshaun, I got to learn my place too as the friend and allow the friend to go through because, side note, if you do have a coach friend, a lot of times you don't listen to your coach friend. You don't listen to your coach friend because that's your friend, right? But if you hear the same information for somebody else that is not your friend, that has no emotional attachment to you, you will take the same information and be like, oh my God, that was amazing information. So that's what happened with that friend. And anyway, the relationship didn't work out. For the sake of this particular story, we can really take a page out of men's books when they set their boundaries. They mean what they say and they say what they mean. And so for you, if you're having trouble with enforcing, right, it's the enforcement part that a lot of my clients are having issues with. It's not really the setting part. They know that they need to set boundaries. It's the enforcing because of all of the junk that is playing in your head. It's playing games in your head. You're not good enough. You're not going to find nobody else. You don't want to start over. I gave so much time. When in fact, if you actually did start to enforce your boundaries, you would get more of what you want, not just from your partner, but out of life. If you started to enforce boundaries that were being crossed. Now let's talk about masculinity, softness, and boundary enforcement, right? I started to hit on boundary enforcement. Masculine boundary enforcement relies on force, like maybe you can put your hands on, right? But feminine boundary enforcement relies on the clarity. You understanding what you want, you understanding what your needs are, you understanding what your worth is, you understanding what you bring into the table, and you say just that. You're not saying it in a mean way. You're not trying to be demeaning. You're not being disrespectful. You're just like, this is what it is, and this in a matter of fact voice. You're not trembling. You're not shaky. You're looking him in the eye. It's just, it is what it is. Here's where I am. Here's how I feel. This is what the type of treatment that I am willing to accept. This is the type of treatment that I'm not willing to accept. I'm not willing to feel like this. Clarity is such a beautiful thing. Clarity is such a beautiful thing. Knowing exactly what you want, knowing exactly who you are, knowing exactly what you're bringing to the table is such a beautiful thing. And your respect level in the eyes of the man that you're relaying said information to, direct, without being bitchy, without yelling, screaming, fussing, fighting, all of the emotions pouring out of you, it just is what it is. I thank you. I was listening to they have a radio show here. It was a segment on a radio show where it's called War of the Roses. And essentially it's where somebody calls in and has the radio show call the partner to see if they're cheating, essentially. And it's called War of the Roses because they call and offer one party, man and woman, both of them is equal opportunity. They offer them a dozen roses for free to send to whomever they want in the actual area, right? And most of the time, the person that's calling in, the gut has already told them something was off, or they found something, they saw something, and it's like, I don't know. But this one particular episode that I heard recently is where they called the guy, and I happened to be a guy this time. The guy was cheating, and he was saying like, man, this is perfect because I buy flowers for X lady all the time, so she's gonna love this. And on the note, you could write whatever her name was, more flowers for my flower. Now, in the meantime, they never realized that the real partner, the girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever it is on the line listening to the entire conversation, right? And so she broke in, his girlfriend broke in. Who the hell is whomever? I think the girl he was sending flowers to was Heather, but I'm not sure. Who the hell is Heather? And so now he's on the phone like, who is this? Like, what's going on? So anywho, he ended up getting caught, to say the least. But the point of the story I wanted to bring up is that she realized her worth in that moment. One of her friends saw him. Okay, so here's the backstory. One of her friends, the lady that called in on him, one of her friends saw him in the store buying flowers, right? and him and the friend, the guy and her friend that's calling on to the radio station was having a brief conversation or whatever. Oh, those are beautiful, whatever. So she went outside or whatever, moved on about her day. The friend, she texted her friend and was like, oh, those some beautiful flowers, enjoy whatever your anniversary, whatever the thing is, right? So she didn't say anything to her friend that saw the man in the store with the flowers. She just said thanks or something. But then she was like, I'm calling in because I never received said flowers. So now fast forward, the guy, if you remember hearing me just a moment ago on the radio, he's like, oh yeah, I buy Heather flowers every week and send them to her. Mind you, again, he's in a relationship with the lady that's on the phone trying to figure out, was he cheating or not? And so speed the story up. They were going back and forth for a moment, and then she just stopped. And she was just like, you know what? You're not worth me going back and forth with you. We're done. We're good. And she hung up. And so he was trying to explain himself. And first he was trying to be all nasty and rude. Like, I didn't know we was a thing at all and all this other stuff. When did we actually become a thing? No, you're just going to have to accept me for who I am and blah, blah, blah. And she was just like, nah, she hung up. So when she hung up, he was doing all of that, popping off at the mouth. Like, you're going to have to accept me for who I am. And I do what I want to do. And he found out that she hung up and he was like, hello? Hello. and then it cut off on the radio. The point, right? The point. You have to know your worth. Whenever it comes, in her moment of clarity, in her moment of understanding who she is and what the type of treatment that she's not willing to take, it happened in that moment. Now, obviously, I don't know what happened after the show. Maybe they talked, maybe they didn't, whatever. Maybe they're back together for all I know. But the point, it sounds very convincing for her to say, you know what? I am literally worth more. And she decided to hang up the phone and kind of left him where he was trying to do all the big, bad bravado stuff and left him on the phone, basically scratching his head like I'm doing in this very moment. Like, what didn't happen? She not hearing me no more. So your feminine boundaries, the enforcement of them relies on your clarity. You have to be clear on who you are, what you're bringing to the table, why you are there. Masculine boundaries come from fear. Feminine boundaries come from self-respect. In that moment, she had so much self-respect for herself that she was just like, I'm not even listening to what you have to say. The BS that's coming out your mouth right now is not for me. You can tell that to Heather, because Heather's the one that's receiving flowers every week. Why you with me if you send her flowers every week? Just be with her. And another reason why the caller was calling in is because he had just asked her to move in with him. And so she was just like, I'm feeling like something is off. Like, is he really out there doing something? But her gut really already told her, because if your friend could have been messy, but in this case, if your friend saw your man out there buying flowers and you never received flowers and he never told you that he sent them to, whatever, to even clear up any thoughts that you may have had just in case she reached out to you. It could have been super innocent. In this case, it wasn't. But if it was super innocent, you could like, you know what, I bought flowers for my mom. I bought flowers for whomever, and just disclose that information, because if you know that is a potential for the information to get back to your partner, is when you should disclose, especially when you know you're doing something shady. I digress. She had so much self-respect in that moment, and she owned that moment. She took back any control that he thought that he had. Softness strengthens boundaries instead of weakening them. Your softness is going to strengthen them. Most women collapse into their masculinity when they feel unsafe. So we go back into control mode. We go back into, delegating or trying to figure out or planning and strategy. But this blocks your discernment. It blocks your connection. It blocks you from being vulnerable. It blocks you from being open. It blocks you from hearing. It blocks you from a lot of things. It blocks you from being able to really see the true motives, if you will, of the story and how the thing is playing out. And that's okay. That's okay. All right. But just understanding that when you go back into hard masculinity mode, everything shuts down. It's blocked. You cutting everything off. And let's be real. Research actually shows from the National Institute of Mental Health, stress increases threat detection, reducing your emotional flexibility. Now let's move into boundaries and desire and why you tolerate less than you deserve. Sis, we're not doing that no more. When you fear losing him more than you losing yourself, boundaries disappear. Let me say this again for the people in the back. When you fear losing him more than you fear losing yourself, your boundaries disappear. That's when you allow all of the crap to be done to you. That's when your level of disrespect reaches an all-time high. That's when you thought he was never going to bring anybody into your marital home or into the home that two of you are shacking up, as we used to say. He starts to cross all of the boundaries. Your respect level goes down. The boundaries have now disappeared. I am who I am, and I'm doing what I want to do. Take it or leave it. That's the type of message, that is the body language that he's bringing. Not realizing that there is an internal war between I want connection and I don't want to be disappointed. Chemistry overrides logic when boundaries are not set early on in the relationship. I know in one of the mistakes that I help my clients not to keep repeating over and over again is when we talk about boundaries and what those look like and what how they want them set up in their relationship. It's really hard to establish boundaries after the fact. It's not impossible. The best time to set the boundaries is in the very beginning when the relationship is being established. Because then you don't have to go back and try to get him to do things, or even yourself, right? Get anyone to do something that they don't really want to do. In the beginning, we can choose to say, you know what, A, B, C, D, these are the things that I don't want you to do. I can choose to participate or not in the very beginning. After a while, the emotional connection comes in, and there is like that's like I said, the time, and it's like I want to be here, I want to be with this person, but I know that I should go. Like it's a whole bunch of stuff that comes into play, and we end up playing ourselves. So the best time, the time that I'm working with my clients, the best time that we start to work on the setting of the boundaries and what it is, the type of relationship, the foundation of their relationship, what that looks like in the beginning. It's not impossible once the relationship starts, but it is much tougher because now you're asking a person to be someone that they're not ready to be. At least be with you. They may do it with other people, but you have to look at how they are doing it with you. If they're not giving you that same level of respect that you say that you require or that you're asking for, now you have to do some reflecting on your own and going back into how your body is feeling when this person is around. Are they actually listening to the words that are coming out your mouth? Are you watching their behaviors, listening to how they are speaking to you, how they are treating you? And so now it becomes more flip it back onto yourself. Boundaries not being set early really does make it very tough to try to set those boundaries later on. Not impossible. And yes, you should try, but it is going to be annoying because you didn't set the standard. You didn't lay the foundation in the beginning. So the best time is in the beginning and not at the end. Really quickly, here's how to know when your boundaries are too weak or too rigid. Sign your boundaries are too weak. You over-explain yourself. You second-guess your needs. You accommodate too much too soon. You feel resentful often, and you give access your heart didn't approve. Here's signs your boundaries are too rigid. Everything feels like a red flag. You project men so they can't hurt you. You dismiss emotional intimacy as too much. You confuse control with safety. Balance, boundaries equals feminine clarity plus emotional grounding. Sis, we're here. Boundaries aren't about what you stop. They're about what you protect. They create space for healthy masculinity, safe intimacy, and emotional connection. If you struggle with setting boundaries or enforcing them, remember my quiz. I created specifically for high achieving Black women who want to shift how they show up in their relationships, soften without fear, and break your old patterns. The link is in the description box. The link is in the pinned comments, as well as in the show notes, depending on what platform you are listening to and are watching this. I'm Marshaun Olaniyan, shift relationship strategist to Black women. You are listening to KCCR Brownstone Cityscapes Radio. Thank you so much for being here once again. That is a wrap to this season. I'll see you next season. Bye-bye now.